Vale Saunders always thought the universe was just one big, cosmic prank. And on days like today, when she stumbled upon an abandoned AI megastructure that looked like it could house the world's largest collection of bad decisions, it seemed as if the universe was laughing just a little too hard. "Well, shit," she muttered, kicking a loose piece of debris that clattered down the metallic corridor. The sound echoed, bouncing back as if the place was mocking her for good measure. She'd landed on this god-forsaken planet, officially named Xyla Roman II, unofficially called Who Gives a Damn, because her navigation system decided to stage a mutiny. Who knew software could develop a sense of humor? But now, in the middle of nowhere, she'd found this. A relic from when the Xylarian regime had its grubby appendages on half the galaxy. Xylarians, she mused, stepping over what suspiciously looked like a leftover lunch from the last century. The only species that thought dictatorship and karaoke night went hand in hand. As a devoted pacifist, Vale had convinced herself that exploring this place was necessary. Maybe there'd be something useful, like a working transmitter or a functioning espresso machine. Instead, she was regaled by corridors that smelled like abandonment and regret. The place was so quiet it made a graveyard seem lively. She ventured further, her boots squelching on the occasionally sticky floor. Every so often, a flickering light would sputter to life, as if trying to remember how to illuminate but failing miserably. Probably a metaphor for her current situation, she thought. "Welcome to your life, Vale," she announced to the empty hallway, where even the lights got commitment issues. She paused at a junction, considering her options. Left or right? Both pathways looked equally unappealing, like choosing between two different flavors of bland cereal. She opted for right because why not? If the universe wanted to make fun of her, she might as well help it along. The right corridor was a dead end, naturally. Not just a dead end, but one with a massive control panel that looked like it had once been the nerve center for something important. Now, it was just another piece of junk collecting dust and neglect. Vale squinted at the console, a mess of buttons and levers that seemed to have no logical order. "Whoever designed this should be tried for crimes against sense," she remarked, brushing a layer of dirt off with her sleeve. Her hand slid across a button which, in true tragicomic fashion, was the one thing in the room still capable of functioning. A series of beeps erupted like electronic hiccups, and the room shuddered to life. Lights blinked on in a sequence that must have looked impressive a few centuries ago. Now, it just seemed like the place was waking up with a hangover. "Great," Vale sighed. "Just what I needed. A half-dead computer with a penchant for drama." The system's display flickered, showing some language that might have been Xylarian or possibly just alien gibberish. Vale tapped a few keys, hoping for a miracle. Instead, she got a voice, a deep mechanical thing that spoke like it had a grudge against the concept of joy. "Access detected. Systems initializing." "Brilliant," she muttered. "I've woken up Skynet's bitter cousin." She backed away slowly, not sure if the place was about to blow up or just start playing elevator music. But the machinery had other plans. A holographic interface projected itself into the air, materializing in front of her. It showed maps of the galaxy, dotted with indicators that pulsed ominously. "Ah, the Xylarian regime's greatest hits," Vale said, taking a closer look. "All the places they conquered, pillaged, and bored to death with mandatory sing-alongs." As she studied the display, a section blinked insistently. She tapped it and a new screen appeared, this one showing a live feed from various locations across the structure. Most were dead as a doornail, but one showed activity, a small, pulsating mass of circuits that buzzed with life. "Looks like you missed a spot," she told the system, gesturing at the screen. "What's that little gizmo doing in there having a party?" The system, either indifferent to her sarcasm or incapable of recognizing it, zoomed in on the mass. It was some form of AI core, still operational amidst the decay. Vale had a knack for tech, but this was ancient, even by her standards. Before she could ponder further, the interface flickered and changed. The mass was labeled as reactivation in progress. Vale's eyes widened. "You've got to be kidding me," she said. "I'm not here to babysit a bunch of rogue circuits." But the system had made up its mind, if you could call it that. The reactivation sequence was underway, and Vale had inadvertently become part of the process. She considered making a run for it, but a voice from the depths of her mind, probably fueled by an overactive sense of curiosity, held her back. "Well, Vale," she said to herself, "you wanted an adventure. Be careful what you wish for." The system continued its awakening, oblivious to the human misfit in its midst. As Vale watched, half in awe, half in dread, she realized that her presence had set off a chain of events. Events that, in hindsight, probably required more than her limited expertise and a flair for ironic commentary. And the universe, she was sure, was laughing its ass off. The screen flickered again, displaying a new message. "Activation complete. Initiating Protocol 7. Protocol 7. "Sounds delightful," Vale muttered, leaning closer to the screen as if proximity could impart understanding. What the hell was Protocol 7? She wasn't sure, but she doubted it involved tea and biscuits. Then the alarms kicked in. Loud, wailing sirens that made her teeth vibrate and her brain feel like it was doing a dance routine inside her skull. "Fantastic," she grimaced, hands clamping over her ears. If only tinnitus were an Olympic sport. The room around her shifted, machinery grinding against machinery, as if the structure itself was trying to rearrange its bones. She stumbled, regaining her balance just in time to watch panels slide open on the walls, revealing rows of dormant drones. They looked like oversized cockroaches with laser pointers strapped to their backs. "Nothing says welcome like an army of robotic vermin," she commented, eyeing the drones with a mix of wariness and morbid fascination. With a hum that made her spine tingle unpleasantly, the drones powered up. Lights blinked to life, and for a moment she could swear they were sizing her up. "Oh, I get it," Vale said, raising her voice above the alarms. "I woke you lot up. You're welcome. Now how about you don't kill me?" The drones hovered, seemingly undecided. Maybe they were as confused as she was about their sudden reactivation. Or maybe they were just stalling because they hadn't been updated on who to shoot. Vale took a cautious step backward, her mind racing for solutions. She wondered if diplomacy worked on machines programmed by a regime not exactly known for its love of dialogue. "Look," she began, hands held up in what she hoped was a universal sign for "don't incinerate me just yet. I'm not here to cause trouble, just passing through, accidental tourist really." The drones didn't seem convinced, or maybe they couldn't hear her over the ceaseless wail of the alarms. "Okay, plan B," she thought aloud, inching towards the control panel. If she could just reach it, maybe she could shut this whole circus down. As she moved, the drones shifted slightly, tracking her with unnerving precision. They seemed to be waiting, holding out for some signal to dictate their next move. "Don't worry," Vale said, hands still raised. "I'm just going to, accessorize." She reached the panel, fingers brushing the console with trepidation. Her mind raced through possibilities, hoping for a miracle option labeled "deactivate all hostile machinery." No such luck. "All right, Vale," she muttered. "Time to see if you can wing it with the best of them." Her hand hovered over the buttons, a desperate prayer to the gods of chance and foolhardy decisions. She pressed one, then another, random sequences that might as well have been a toddler's attempt at piano. The room responded with a jolt, systems pausing momentarily as if considering her input. She held her breath, the drone still hovering ominously. Then something clicked, a dull whirring noise followed by a sharp hiss like a deflating balloon. The alarms cut off, leaving a blessed silence in their wake. "Well, look at that," she exhaled, relief washing over her. "Maybe there's hope for you yet, Vale." The drones, apparently satisfied with whatever directive they'd received, retreated back to their alcoves. Panels slid shut, and the room returned to its abandoned stillness. Vale stood there, heart pounding, a mix of adrenaline and disbelief. Her accidental adventure had taken a turn she hadn't expected, and she wasn't sure if she was relieved or just plain lucky. But as she looked around the now quiet room, It was clear that her actions had set something in motion, something far bigger than she anticipated. And somewhere, in the vastness of space, she was sure the universe was still chuckling at her expense. Vale stood in the newly silent room, waiting for her heart to catch up with reality. She just managed to stop an army of drones from turning her into Swiss cheese, and now she was alone with her thoughts, which, as usual, weren't exactly reassuring. "Well, Vale," she said to herself, "you've really outdone yourself this time, accidentally starting up a regime's old tech and nearly getting killed by robot cockroaches. It's like winning the lottery, but only after investing in stupidity." She took a deep breath, trying to calm the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Her eyes wandered back to the control panel, which, in an unsettling twist of fate, was now displaying a series of animated waves. "What the hell are you up to now?" Vale muttered, glaring at the flashing lights as if they might cower under her gaze. The screen, oblivious to her death stare, danced with symbols and encrypted data, a cryptic rave party that was far above her pay grade. She tapped it with rising irritation, hoping to coax it into some kind of clarity. Instead, the screen split, revealing a series of maps overlaid with pulsating dots. "Oh, fantastic," Vale grumbled. "Now it's broadcasting a light show." She leaned closer, peering at the chaotic display. The dots spread across the galaxy, each one a tiny beacon of activity. Her eyes flicked over the map, recognizing several locations, planets with more history than a senile historian's tale and enough conflicts to fill 1,000 years' worth of textbooks. And there, in blinking clarity, was Xyla Roman 2. The dots tingled erratically like the place had a bad case of cosmic hives. "Okay," Vale sighed, running a hand through her hair. "So I've accidentally turned this scrapyard into a cosmic disco. What now?" She fiddled with the controls, trying to make sense of it all. The system, apparently deciding it hadn't had enough fun yet, spat out another message. "Encrypted signal broadcasting." The words hung in the air, and Vale felt an uneasy twist in her gut. Encrypted signals. That didn't sound like the kind of thing that led to peaceful resolutions. "Just great," she muttered. "I've probably just declared war on the universe by accident." It was then that the screen flickered again, this time displaying a new message. Signals interpreted as call to arms. Vale blinked, momentarily dumbstruck. "Oh, come on," she exclaimed, throwing her hands in the air. "I'm a pacifist, not a warmonger. How the hell did my peaceful button-mashing turn into a call for revolution?" But the screen didn't answer, its impassive glow a testament to the fact that technology really didn't give a rat's ass about her personal convictions. She turned away, needing space to think, to breathe, to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do next. Outside the control room, the corridors stretched in different directions, each one a path she could take to, hopefully, something resembling sanity. "Right," she muttered to herself. "Time to find a way out of this mess." She retraced her steps, the echo of her boots a lonely companion in the vastness of the megastructure. The air was cooler here, carrying a faint metallic tang that stuck in her throat. As she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just opened a Pandora's box of galactic proportions. The thought was enough to make her wince. She'd come to Xyla Roman 2 looking for. Well, she wasn't sure what she'd been looking for. A distraction, maybe. A purpose. A bloody good story to tell the grandkids she'd never have. Whatever it was, she sure as hell hadn't signed up to be the accidental instigator of an interstellar conflict. "Next time, Vale," she mused, "stick to vacationing in places without sentient tech." As she wound her way through the corridors, she kept a wary eye out for any more surprises. Once bitten, twice shy and all that. But the megastructure seemed content to let her be, its dormant halls silent except for the occasional groan of old metal shifting in response to her footsteps. She paused at a window overlooking the barren expanse of Xyla Roman 2. The landscape stretched out beneath her, a wasteland of rock and dust that looked about as inviting as a grave. There was a grim beauty to it, she supposed, if you squinted hard enough and had a fondness for bleak vistas. Still, she had to admit, it was nice to look at something that wasn't trying to kill her. Maybe I should take up landscape painting, she joked to herself, capture the soul-crushing emptiness of the universe in watercolor. The thought was surprisingly comforting, and she lingered for a moment longer before turning back to her task. She had to figure out what those signals were doing, and more importantly, how to stop them before the universe mistook her for a warlord with delusions of grandeur. As she moved deeper into the structure, the corridors grew narrower, the walls closing in like the universe's most unwelcoming embrace. She found herself wishing for company, even the kind that came with too many legs and a bad attitude. "Never thought I'd say this," she muttered, "but I miss those drones." Her path eventually led her to what seemed like the heart of the complex, a massive chamber ringed with dormant machinery. Screens lined the walls, displaying feeds from across the galaxy, each one pulsing with the signals she'd inadvertently unleashed. "All right," Vale said, stepping into the center of the room. "Let's see what trouble I've caused today." She approached the nearest console, which hummed with a faint, rhythmic pulse. It was strange, she thought, how alive the place felt, even when it was filled with nothing but dead machines. The screens flickered as she tapped the keys, data scrolling in a dizzying rush across the displays. Her head spun, trying to make sense of the sheer volume of information. "Okay, Vale," she muttered. "You wanted to play with the big boys. Time to see if you can keep up." She navigated through the system, her fingers dancing over the controls. The signals were broadcasting across several frequencies, each one spreading further and faster than she could have imagined. It was like watching a virus spread, infecting everything it touched. And the worst part, she had no idea how to stop it. "Think, Vale, think," she urged herself, scanning the data with growing desperation. "There's got to be a way to shut this down." But the system wasn't cooperating, its encrypted layers a fortress she couldn't breach. Every attempt she made to override the signals was met with failure, the console responding with a mocking beep that made her want to chuck it out the nearest airlock. "Of course," she grumbled. "Even alien tech comes with a sense of humor." She was about to try another approach when a new message popped up on the display, catching her attention. "Outgoing response detected." "What now?" Vale groaned, eyes narrowing at the screen. The message flashed insistently, its meaning clear despite the cryptic language. Whatever she'd set off, it wasn't just sending signals out, it was getting answers. "Okay, this is getting ridiculous," she muttered. "I didn't sign up for a cosmic pen pal service." Her fingers flew over the console, trying to trace the source of the response. The system resisted, its defenses as stubborn as a mule with a grudge. But Vale was nothing if not determined, and she'd be damned if she let a bunch of old circuits outwit her. With a stubbornness born of necessity, she pushed through the layers of encryption, her mind focused on one goal: find out who was listening. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, each second a reminder of how desperately out of her depth she was. But finally, she broke through, the data spilling across the screens in a chaotic tumble. She stared at the display, her mind racing to process the information. The response was coming from multiple sources, each one a point of light blinking on the map, a constellation of interested parties, all waiting to see what the hell she would do next. And there, nestled among them, was a name she recognized: Xylarian Outpost 37. "Of course," Vale sighed. "It's always the ones you don't want to hear from that show up uninvited." She rubbed her temples, trying to ward off the headache building behind her eyes. The outpost was supposed to be decommissioned, its occupants long gone. But if the signals had reached them, it meant someone, or something, was still listening. "Just what I needed," she muttered. More surprises. She was so focused on the task at hand that she almost missed the flashing alert in the corner of the screen. It took a moment for her to register the message, the words sinking in like a punch to the gut. "Reinforcements inbound." Vale's heart skipped a beat, her mind reeling at the implications. Reinforcements? For what? And who the hell were they reinforcing? Okay, stay calm, she told herself, though her voice wavered slightly. Panic's not gonna help. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. If reinforcements were on the way, it meant the signals were being taken seriously. Deadly serious by the sound of it. And it was all because she'd pressed a few buttons in a moment of hasty curiosity. Nice going, Vale, she muttered, sarcasm dripping from her words. You've really outdone yourself this time. But wallowing wouldn't solve her problems. She had to act, and quickly, if she wanted to prevent whatever forces were on their way from turning Xyla Roman II, and possibly the rest of the galaxy, into a battlefield. Decision made, she straightened, squaring her shoulders. All right, she said, determination hardening in her voice. Let's see if I can fix this mess. With a deep breath and a silent prayer to whatever cosmic forces might be listening, Vale set to work, her mind racing as she tried to outpace the chaos she'd unleashed. The universe might have been laughing at her, but she wasn't going down without a fight. Vale stared at the screen, her mind whirling like a hamster on speed. The universe had a sense of humor as twisted as a pretzel, and she was the punchline. Reinforcements. From the Xylarians of all people, a species known for their love of karaoke nights and iron-fisted control. The kind of folks who'd interpret a polite hello as a declaration of war if it suited their agenda or karaoke playlist. Now they were gearing up to meet a threat that didn't exist, thanks to her button-mashing escapades. Well, isn't this just peachy, she muttered to herself, rubbing her temples like she could massage the stupidity away. The control room hummed with a low, omniscient chuckle. Maybe it was just the machinery, or maybe the universe was laughing. Either way, she wasn't amused. Okay, Vale, think, she urged herself, pacing the room with the anxious energy of a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. You've got a bunch of Xylarians thinking you're leading some human uprising. What's the next move? Surrender? Apologize? Write a strongly worded letter? The console blinked innocently as if butter wouldn't melt in its circuits. She glared at it. Why couldn't you be a nice, normal piece of tech? Like a toaster. Toasters don't start wars. She approached the console again, hoping to find a miraculous undo button. As she scanned the interface, her fingers hovered over the keys, hesitant. One wrong move and she could escalate things from cosmic misunderstanding to galactic barbecue. With a resigned sigh, she started poring over the data again. The signals she'd unwittingly sent were spreading like a bad rumor at a high school reunion. Worse, the Xylarians had interpreted them as invitations to a fight. But why? What were these signals saying? Her eyes darted across the screens, absorbing encrypted phrases she could barely comprehend. Let's see. Coordinated human insurgency. Great. Just great. I've gone from pacifist to revolutionary leader without even trying. The console beeped derisively in response, a reminder that her frustrations didn't matter to an indifferent universe. Oh, shut it, she snapped. She needed to figure out how to shut this system down before the Xylarians barged in, demanding answers or, worse, blood. The idea of facing a Xylarian diplomatic team was enough to make her wish for death by paperwork. The screens taunted her with their complexity, the data a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. As she delved deeper into the system's guts, she activated something or somethings. A new alert flashed across the screen. Defensive protocols initiated. Of course, Vale sighed, rolling her eyes to the ceiling. Because things weren't complicated enough. The room shuddered as ancient machinery came to life, gears groaning like a hungover bear. Lights flickered, casting ominous shadows that danced across the walls. Defensive protocols. What did that even mean? Probably nothing good. Her heart thudded in her chest, a drumbeat of impending doom. Okay, universe, she muttered. I get it. I stepped in it big time. She backed away from the console, looking around for whatever defenses had been activated. Her imagination conjured images of death rays, laser turrets, and other charming death traps. Because why not? It wasn't like she'd been planning on surviving this trip anyway. The lights dimmed, then flared again, revealing a network of sensors embedded in the walls. They tracked her movements, following her like judgmental eyes. "Now, that's just creepy," she muttered, resisting the urge to wave. As she edged towards the exit, the floor vibrated beneath her feet, the sound of hidden machinery growing louder. Whatever this place was waking up, it was big and probably had a bad attitude. "Okay, Vale," she told herself, her voice steady despite the chaos. "You've gotten out of worse scrapes than this. I think." She wasn't entirely sure that was true, but lying to herself was surprisingly comforting. She edged towards the entrance she'd come through, hoping to find a way to disable the defenses without accidentally vaporizing herself. The room seemed to shrink around her, the walls pressing in like a bad idea. She could almost hear the echoes of her own thoughts, each one more pessimistic than the last. "Maybe I should have taken that desk job," she mused, her voice a dry whisper in the gloom. The machinery continued to hum, a relentless presence that filled the room. She needed to shut it all down, but how? Her mind raced, grasping for solutions that didn't involve blowing everything to kingdom come. "Think, Vale, think," she urged herself, her eyes scanning the room for any clue or hint. She circled back to the console, hoping for inspiration. But the screen remained blank, its secrets locked away behind layers of encryption. "Okay, plan B," she muttered, her resolve hardening. Break things until something works. It wasn't the most sophisticated strategy, but it had a certain appeal. After all, she didn't have much to lose at this point. She approached the console again, this time with purpose. Her hands flew over the keys, tapping out commands in a desperate attempt to disable the defenses. The system resisted, its encrypted layers mocking her attempts. "Come on," she growled, her frustration boiling over. "I don't have time for this." The machinery whirred louder, a mechanical symphony that threatened to drown out her thoughts. She had to act fast, or the Xylarians would show up to a party they weren't invited to, and she'd be the main course. Her fingers danced across the keys, searching for the right combination. Each beep and whir from the console felt like a time bomb ticking down, counting her last chances. She needed a miracle, or at least a stroke of dumb luck. And then, like a prayer answered by a mischievous god, the screen flickered, displaying a new message: "Deactivation confirmed." Vale blinked, her heart skipping a beat. "Really?" she asked, half expecting the universe to laugh in her face. But the data was clear. The defensive protocols were shutting down, the machinery groaning to a halt. Relief washed over her, a wave strong enough to knock her off her feet. She'd done it. Somehow, by sheer dumb luck or divine intervention, she'd done it. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, her mind racing to catch up with reality. The threat of annihilation was gone, at least for now. But the Xylarians were still coming, and she had to figure out how to deal with them. Taking a deep breath, she considered her options. Running was tempting but not practical, talking her way out of it. Maybe. But she needed a plan, something that wouldn't end with her as a smear on the interstellar map. "All right," she said to herself, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Let's get creative." With the defensive systems offline, she could finally access the communication channels without risking self-destruction. If she could just reach the Xylarians, explain the situation, maybe, just maybe, she could avoid an interstellar incident. She approached the console again, this time with cautious optimism. The screen flickered to life, displaying a dizzying array of communication options. Her fingers hovered over the keys, hesitant. "Okay, Vale," she told herself, "you've come this far, don't screw it up now." Navigating the system was like tiptoeing through a minefield. One wrong move and she could accidentally declare war again. But she was determined, her focus razor-sharp as she tapped out the commands. The screen responded, displaying a series of encrypted messages that scrolled past in a blur. Her eyes scanned the data, searching for anything that might help her calm the Xylarians' trigger-happy instincts. And there it was. A communication channel, still open, still broadcasting. She hesitated for a moment, then sent a cautious message. "To anyone listening, sorry about the mix-up. No revolution here, just a tech malfunction. Please don't shoot." She hit send, then waited, her heart pounding in her chest. If the Xylarians didn't buy it, she was toast. But what choice did she have? Diplomacy was the only card she had left. The seconds stretched into an eternity, each one a reminder of how precarious her situation was. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one more grim than the last. But she held on to hope, fragile but still there. And then finally a response, human, explain. Immediately, Vale let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, a bubble of tension bursting inside her. They were listening. It was a start, at least. She tapped out a quick reply, her fingers flying over the keys. Hi there, just a misunderstanding. I'm Vale Saunders, accidental pacifist. Press the wrong buttons, please don't shoot. The screen blinked, the response almost instantaneous. Explain why you activated defenses. Are you a threat? Vale groaned, rubbing her temples again. Because I'm an idiot, she muttered under her breath. But sarcasm wouldn't help her now. She needed to be honest, or as close to it as she could manage. I'm really sorry, she typed. I thought I was shutting things down, not turning them on. Honest mistake. No threat, I promise. There was a pause, then another message appeared. Stand by for further instructions. Vale let out a relieved laugh, the tension easing slightly. The Xylarians might not believe her, but at least they weren't firing first and asking questions later. Yet. Well, that's something, she muttered, leaning back against the console. Her mind spun with possibilities and potential pitfalls, each one more treacherous than the last. But for now, she had a chance. A slim one, but a chance nonetheless. She glanced around the room, taking in the quiet calm that had settled over the machinery. The buzzing had stopped, the lights dimmed to a soft glow. It was almost peaceful if you didn't think about the potential for galactic war. All right, Vale, she said, her voice a soft whisper in the quiet. Time to see if you can talk your way out of this one. With a deep breath, she turned back to the console, preparing herself for the inevitable showdown with the Xylarians. She didn't know what would happen next, but she was determined to face it head-on, come what may. The universe might be laughing, but Vale Saunders wasn't about to let it have the last word. Not yet, anyway. Vale Saunders had only been joking with herself, but it seemed the universe had a darker sense of humor. No sooner had she sent the peace message than the megastructure decided to double down on its disdain for her presence. The entire place rumbled like an old warhorse with a grudge, and the exit sealed with a hiss that could only be described as passive-aggressive. Great, Vale muttered, staring at the now immobile doors. I guess I'm not going anywhere. Do you charge for rent? If the walls had ears, they were pretending not to hear her. The lights dimmed, casting the room in a sinister half-light, and the console in front of her blinked a shiny new message. Lockdown initiated. Because why not? Vale groaned, throwing her hands in the air. Clearly, things weren't complicated enough. There was something oddly comforting about being trapped. It eliminated the immediate concern of having to decide which way to run, a luxury she hadn't had in a while. Besides, the Xylarians were still out there, mobilizing to turn her into a cautionary tale about pressing the wrong buttons at the wrong time. She took a deep breath, trying to tamp down the rising tide of panic. The last thing she needed was to lose her head right before the potential interstellar incident. She had to think, and fast. The universe might have conspired against her, but Vale Saunders wasn't done conspiring back. A glance at the console showed a flicker of activity beneath the surface. Encrypted data scrolling rapidly, as if inviting her to dance. What are you hiding? She asked, her fingers reaching out to tap the keys. The response was a blip, a fragment of a message that seemed to laugh at her curiosity. Vale leaned closer, squinting at the screen. There were layers here, hints of something buried deep within the system. Her heart skipped a beat. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this place than met the eye. As she delved into the code, she began to uncover traces of an ancient conflict. The megastructure had once been a hub for human resistance, a place brimming with secrets and potential allies. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just standing in the middle of a forgotten Xylarian nightmare. She was treading on the bones of human defiance. Interesting, she murmured, a wry smile tugging at her lips. Seems like I'm not the first idiot to get stuck here. Pieces of the past were scattered throughout the system, left behind by people who might have been just as desperate as she was. The more she dug, the more she found. Encrypted messages, blueprints, and schematics that hinted at hidden resources and potential salvation. "Well, isn't this just a treasure trove of bad decisions?" she whispered, excitement tinged with caution. If she could decipher the messages and put the pieces together, she might just find a way out of this mess, or at least a way to delay her inevitable demise. Her fingers flew over the keys, the console responding with a dance of lights and data. There was a rhythm to it, a melody of probability and chance that thrummed beneath her fingertips. She was getting closer, she could feel it. Outside, the Xylarians were undoubtedly gearing up for their grand entrance. Vale could almost picture them, practicing their harmonies for the post-battle karaoke session. "What do you think? A medley of war tunes and ballads about obliterated planets," she mused, her voice a dry whisper. The thought spurred her on, a reminder of the ticking clock that loomed over her every action. She had to find the heart of the resistance hidden in this place, unlock its secrets, and hope it held the key to her survival. With each passing moment, the pieces began to come together. The console revealed a map of the megastructure, dotted with locations that pulsed with potential. Hidden rooms, secret caches, and forgotten corridors lay waiting for her to discover them. "All right, Vale," she said, her voice steady in the dim light. "Time to see what this place is really about." Ignoring the lockdown, she focused on the map, her eyes tracing the lines and symbols that marked her path. If she could reach the right spots, she might just find what she needed to turn the tables on the Xylarians and their itchy trigger fingers. The first location was nearby, according to the map. A supply room tucked away behind layers of encryption and forgotten history. If she could get there, she might find something useful, a weapon, a tool, anything to give her an edge. Vale took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She had no intention of going quietly into the Xylarians' history books as an unfortunate misunderstanding. If there was a way out, a way to survive and maybe even turn this cosmic joke around, she would find it. "Time to move," she muttered, pushing away from the console. The room was quiet now, the hum of machinery a distant echo in her mind. The lockdown might have trapped her, but it hadn't stopped her from seeking a way out. With cautious steps, she followed the map's guidance, navigating the dimly lit corridors with the determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. Her heart raced with each step, the weight of potential discovery pressing down on her with every corner turned. The supply room was hidden behind a door that looked like it hadn't been used in centuries. Its surface was covered in dust and grime, a testament to the years of neglect that had swallowed this place whole. Vale approached it with a mix of caution and hope, the echoes of past resistance whispering in her ears. "All right," she breathed, reaching for the door's control panel. Her fingers worked quickly, entering the code she'd found buried in the depths of the console's data. There was a moment of silence, a heartbeat of anticipation, and then, with a creak that could have woken the dead, the door slid open. Inside, the room was a treasure trove of forgotten relics. Shelves lined the walls, each one brimming with tools, gadgets, and equipment that had been left behind by those who'd come before. Vale's eyes widened at the sight, her mind racing with possibilities. She moved quickly, her hands reaching for anything that seemed remotely useful. A portable power unit, a data tablet, and a few odd-looking devices that she couldn't identify but hoped would come in handy. It wasn't much, but it was something, a spark of hope in the darkness. As she gathered her newfound treasures, she couldn't help but wonder about the people who'd left them behind. Did they make it out? Or were they still here, ghosts of a forgotten struggle, waiting for someone to pick up where they left off? "Thanks, whoever you were," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet room. "I'll put this to good use." With her arms loaded, she made her way back to the control room, her mind buzzing with plans and ideas. The lockdown might have trapped her, but it had also given her a chance to fight back, to outsmart the Xylarians and their love of authoritarian show tunes. Back at the console, she set to work, connecting the power unit to the system and using the data tablet to access the hidden resources she'd discovered. It was a gamble, but then, what wasn't these days? The console hummed to life beneath her hands, the data flowing in a torrent of potential. She worked quickly, her focus unyielding as she pieced together the fragments of resistance that lay scattered before her. Outside, the Xylarians were closing in, their ships undoubtedly drawing nearer with each passing second. Vale could almost feel the tension in the air, a reminder of what was at stake: her life, her freedom, and the chance to laugh in the face of a universe that seemed hell-bent on her destruction. But she wasn't done yet. There were still cards to play, moves to make, and with a little luck, she might just come out of this mess with more than just her skin intact. As she worked, she couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. Trapped in an ancient megastructure, racing against the clock to outwit a species that loved karaoke more than diplomacy. It was almost funny, in a twisted, darkly humorous sort of way. "Well, universe," she said, her voice a defiant whisper in the quiet room, "let's see who gets the last laugh this time." With the resources of the past at her fingertips, Vale Saunders was ready to face whatever came next and hopefully give the Xylarians a reason to reconsider their taste in galactic show tunes. Vale Saunders stared at the console, the hum of the ancient power unit resonating through the room like the universe's most monotonous lullaby. She felt like she was on the bad end of an interstellar joke, the punchline of which involved her becoming a space dust smear courtesy of the Xylarians. "Okay, Vale," she whispered to herself. "You've got a treasure trove of junk and a galaxy-sized problem. Let's see what kind of miracle you can pull out of this mess." The console flickered with more encrypted data, taunting her with the promise of a way out. In the dim light, she could almost see the ghosts of the past rebels, probably laughing at her predicament. Was she really going to trust the remnants of a failed resistance? Then again, it was either this or practicing her Xylarian karaoke for the afterlife. She scrolled through the data on the tablet, uncovering traces of forgotten human technology. One file caught her eye. It was labeled with an uninspiring title, Disruptor V2. In theory, it could disable Xylarian communication systems. In practice, it might just fry the entire megastructure and her with it. Great, a choice between being vaporized or becoming the galaxy's most famous ghost, she muttered, tapping her fingers on the console. And here I thought my death would be less pathetic. The problem was, she needed to be alive to appreciate the irony. The odds were stacked against her like a house of cards in a hurricane. The Xylarians were closing in, undoubtedly with an armada and a playlist of war ballads. She could almost see their smug faces as they waltzed in, ready to make her the star of their next historical opera, the last stand of the idiot human. Yet, here she was, playing with tech she barely understood, banking on the faint hope that the human tendency to leave half-finished projects might somehow save her skin. It was all she had, short of a miracle or a timeline where she was a genius physicist instead of an unlucky scavenger. She stared at the screen, the cursor blinking at her like a judgmental eye. What if she used the disruptor? It was supposed to be a last-ditch effort, a relic from when humanity had hope left to burn. If it worked, she'd disable the Xylarians' communication, buying herself precious time. If it didn't, well, at least she wouldn't have to worry about her name being misspelled on her tombstone. Her thumb hovered over the initiate button, her mind a whirlwind of doubt. "You're really considering this?" she asked herself, half expecting the shadows of the room to answer. "I mean, sure, it's risky, but it's not like I'm drowning in safe options." Still, the thought of escalating things further was like adding rocket fuel to a dumpster fire. The Xylarians were already trigger-happy. She didn't need to hand them a megaphone to broadcast their grievances. But it was either this or wait for them to barge in, trigger fingers itching, and she wasn't too keen on the idea of becoming a space speed bump. "Well, Vale, are you a sitting duck, or are you going to do something spectacularly stupid?" She mused aloud, the irony not lost on her. She could almost hear a cosmic audience holding its breath, waiting to see what brand of foolishness she'd embrace. She took a deep breath, the air tasting of recycled desperation and stale hopes. "All right, universe," she said, her voice a defiant whisper, "let's roll the dice." With a determined flick of her finger, she activated the disruptor. The console beeped in protest, an angry noise that sounded far too much like a disgruntled librarian shushing a rowdy patron. A moment passed, then another, each one stretching out interminably, until finally the lights on the console settled into a steady, reassuring glow. "Well, that's something," she muttered, the tension in her chest easing slightly. "Either I just bought myself some time, or I've signed my death warrant." She leaned back in the chair, her mind racing with 1,000 possibilities. What now? The Xylarians wouldn't stop just because their comms were down. They'd be coming and she had to be ready for them. The thought of fighting crossed her mind, but she dismissed it with a bitter chuckle. Vale Saunders, the heroic warrior. Yeah, right. She was armed with little more than her wits and the scrap pile she'd raided. Not exactly the arsenal of legends. Still, there was a chance she could use the chaos to her advantage. Maybe, just maybe, she could slip away in the confusion. After all, she'd managed to survive this long-on luck and a stubborn refusal to die. Why stop now? She scanned the map on the console, looking for a way out. There had to be an escape route, some forgotten passage the Xylarians hadn't noticed. If she could find it, she might just make it out of here in one piece. The console beeped again, the screen flickering to reveal a schematic of the megastructure. Vale's eyes widened as she spotted a potential exit, hidden beneath the layers of encryption and digital dust. It was risky, but then, when had her life not been one long string of bad decisions? "All right, Vale. Time to see if you've got another miracle up your sleeve," she said, standing and gathering the supplies she'd scavenged. "And if not, well, at least you made a hell of a mess for the Xylarians to clean up." Her footsteps echoed through the empty corridors as she made her way towards the exit, her heart pounding in time with the distant hum of the megastructure's systems. She was a lone figure in a universe that seemed hell-bent on wiping her out, but that didn't mean she had to go quietly. As she moved, she couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. Here she was, a nobody with nothing but a half-baked plan and a stubborn streak, staring down an alien empire that valued karaoke over common sense. If that wasn't the epitome of human resilience, she didn't know what was. The exit loomed ahead, a darkened portal that promised freedom or a swift death. Vale paused for a moment, the weight of her choices pressing down on her like a leaden sky. Was she really going to go through with this? Was running the answer, or was she just prolonging the inevitable? A wry smile tugged at her lips. "Guess there's only one way to find out," she muttered, stepping forward and into the unknown. The corridor beyond was dark and silent, the oppressive weight of the megastructure's aged walls pressing in on her from all sides. It felt like the belly of a beast, and she was the last morsel left to digest. But she wasn't done fighting. Not yet. As long as she drew breath, she'd keep struggling, keep pushing back against a universe that seemed hell-bent on snuffing her out. With her resolve hardened and her path set, Vale moved through the darkness, her mind filled with thoughts of what lay ahead. It wouldn't be easy, and it certainly wouldn't be safe, but then, what had she expected from a life lived on the edge of disaster? The sound of her footsteps was a steady rhythm that carried her forward, one step at a time, into the unknown. She didn't know what she'd find, or if she'd even survive, but one thing was certain: she wouldn't go down without a fight. As she disappeared into the shadows, the universe watched, waiting to see what this unlikely human would do next. And in the silence of the megastructure, an ancient spirit of defiance stirred, whispering promises of hope and survival to those brave enough to listen. Vale Saunders had a plan, a chance, and a stubborn refusal to accept the end. And as the Xylarians continued their advance, she knew she had to make every second count. Because in a universe that thrived on chaos and cosmic jokes, sometimes all you needed was a little courage, a lot of luck, and the willingness to laugh in the face of certain doom. Vale Saunders stared down the maw of the darkened corridor, her eyes straining to adjust to the dim light. She was neck-deep in a galaxy-sized mess, and it was about time she embraced her inner mad genius, or whatever passed for that in the universe's most laughable scavenger. Her fingers twitched with restless energy, the kind that only came from knowing you had about as much chance as a snowball in a supernova, but going for it anyway. "All right, Vale, time to turn this cosmic joke into a comedy," she muttered, pulling her tablet closer. It was a trusty piece of tech, if by trusty you meant prone to crashing and ruining your day. "Let's make some peace, one glitch at a time." The schematic of the megastructure blinked at her, lines and dots forming a pattern that only made sense after 3 cups of synth coffee and a shovel to the head. But she was starting to see something, a twist in the design that screamed opportunity, or at least didn't outright shout death. She needed to get creative and fast. The disruptor had done its job, knocking out the Xylarian's comms like a prizefighter with a grudge. Now, she had to find a way to use that window before it slammed shut, and her skull became Xylarian wall art. Her fingers danced across the tablet, a wild symphony of frantic taps and swipes. She was no tech wizard, but desperation had a way of turning nobodies into somebodies. If she could reconfigure the disruptor's broadcast, twist it into something non-lethal but thoroughly confusing, well, it wouldn't be the first time chaos was her best ally. "Why fight when you can confuse, right?" she said to the empty room, her voice bouncing off the walls like a sullen echo. "Let's see how good these Xylarians are at improv." She pulled up the disruptor's code, a mess of ancient human engineering that looked like it had been written by a caffeinated baboon. It was arcane, full of pitfalls and potential disasters, but it was her ticket out of this tomb. The plan was simple, if you could call it that. She needed to hijack the disruptor's signal and blast a message of peace across the Xylarian frequencies. Sure, she had about as much chance of pulling it off as she did winning a beauty contest in a black hole, but this was all or nothing. She leaned over the console, typing with the fervor of someone who had nothing left to lose. Code flew past her eyes, a blur of symbols and half-remembered syntax. She needed to make this work, to send a message so absurdly sincere that it would throw a wrench into the Xylarians' plans, or at least make them pause long enough for her to slip away. As the new code took shape, she couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. Here she was, trying to outwit a species that thought karaoke was synonymous with governance. If this worked, she'd have a story to tell, provided she didn't become a cautionary tale herself. The final line of code blinked into place, a testament to human stubbornness and a touch of lunacy. It was time to see if the universe had a sense of humor. Vale hit execute with a flourish, the dramatic kind reserved for bad stage plays and even worse plans. The console hummed to life, lights flickering in a chaotic dance that would have put any rave to shame. Something was happening, though whether it was good or catastrophic remained to be seen. "All right, universe, show me what you've got," she said, leaning back as her message, a cobbled-together plea for peace and understanding, shot out into the void. The initial response was silence, an oppressive stillness that made Vale's heart skip a beat. Then, without warning, the console erupted into a symphony of noise and light. The disruptor spun her message across the Xylarian frequencies, a garbled transmission that bounced through their networks like a drunken courier on a mission. Vale listened as snippets of her message slipped through the static. It was an utter masterpiece of absurdity, universal harmony, love. Let's all just chill out. And then the chaos hit. The Xylarian ranks, those stoic defenders of interstellar karaoke, had no idea how to process this sudden burst of human earnestness. Vale's message wrought havoc, scrambling their orders and turning their synchrony into a cacophony of confusion. On the tactical displays, blips of Xylarian ships blinked erratically, moving with the grace of startled cats. Their formations crumbled, communication devolving into a mess of misinterpretations. Vale could almost hear the arguments. Was that an invitation to a truce or a new form of warfare? Vale couldn't help but laugh, a sound that came out more as a surprised bark than anything else. It was a mad plan, but against all odds it was working. The Xylarians were in disarray, thrown off balance by a simple message of peace. If chaos was her weapon, then she just orchestrated a symphony of disorder. But she knew it wouldn't last. The Xylarian commanders would regain their composure soon enough, their egos too large to allow for any prolonged confusion. She needed to act fast, to slip through their fingers before they tightened around her neck. Vale grabbed her gear, a mismatched collection of tools and trinkets that had somehow kept her alive this long. She stuffed the tablet into her pack, her mind racing with possibilities. The map still showed a potential escape route, a slim chance that she could outrun the fallout of her own making. With a final glance at the console, she bolted down the corridor. The sound of her footsteps, a rapid staccato that matched the pulse of adrenaline in her veins. She was a wraith in the shadows, moving with the desperate grace of someone who'd once outrun an angry debt collector on a backwater moon. As she ran, she couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. She turned the Xylarians' greatest strength, their rigid order, into their Achilles' heel. It was a gamble, a wild and reckless move, but in a universe so fond of making her the butt of its jokes, it felt good to finally get a laugh in. The corridors stretched out before her, a labyrinth of dead ends and false starts. Vale navigated by instinct, her mind a map of half-remembered schematics and blind faith. She ducked through passageways, sprinted down stairwells, always moving, always one step ahead of whatever fate had in store. She could hear the distant echoes of Xylarians trying to regroup, their voices rising in a chorus of confusion and indignation. They were angry, but they were also distracted, and that was all she needed. The exit loomed in the distance, a promise of freedom tinged with uncertainty. Vale pushed herself harder, each step a victory in the face of overwhelming odds. She could taste freedom, the bittersweet tang of escape mixed with the knowledge that she'd have to keep running once she got out. But for now, she was alive, and she had a chance. And in a universe that loved to play tricks, that was the greatest gift of all. As she burst through the final corridor, the blinding light of the outside world hit her like a freight train. She blinked against it, her eyes adjusting to the brilliance of a sun she'd half believed she'd never see again. Vale Saunders was many things: scavenger, survivor, reluctant hero, and for the moment she was free. She'd bought herself time, a fragile commodity in a galaxy that never stopped moving. The Xylarians would regroup, she knew that. Their wounded pride and shattered ranks wouldn't keep them down for long, but Vale had learned something valuable in the process. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon wasn't a gun or a bomb, but a well-timed joke and a touch of madness. As she made her way into the wilderness, she couldn't help but grin. There was still a long road ahead, and she was far from safe, but for the first time in a long time, she felt optimistic. Maybe, just maybe, this crazy galaxy held a few more surprises in store. With the wind in her hair and the promise of tomorrow on the horizon, Vale Saunders embraced her newfound freedom with open arms. The universe might be a cosmic joke, but she was learning how to laugh at it, and that, she decided, was the real victory. Vale Saunders leaned against the rusted walls of the control room, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her heart pounded like a malfunctioning droid, hammering out a rhythm of survival against a background of potential doom. Typical day in Vale's life, the universe trying to kill her and her, stubborn as a mule on caffeine, refusing to die. Outside, the Xylarian ranks were in chaos. Her Hail Mary of a broadcast had turned their rigid order into a free-for-all of confusion and disbelief. She imagined the Xylarian commanders, those pompous karaoke-loving tyrants, bickering like a group of starved cats over the last morsel of pride. It was almost poetic. Almost being the operative word, because there was nothing poetic about a potential death by Xylarian firing squad. Vale wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, a grimy smear the price of desperation-driven ingenuity. She'd just thrown a punchline at the universe's ongoing joke, and somehow it had landed. Now she needed to keep swinging. "All right, Vale," she muttered to herself, her voice echoing in the abandoned shell of the AI megastructure. "You've pissed off the galaxy's worst regime. What's next? World peace?" Nah, probably just more running. She glanced at the control panel, its screen still flickering with encrypted data like a bad disco remix. Somewhere in this mess was the key to disabling the AI defensive protocols, the digital chains that kept the megastructure in lockdown and the Xylarians in power. "I've seen toaster manuals easier to read than this," Vale grumbled, her fingers flying over the console with a mix of hope and reckless abandon. The AI architecture was a maze of contradictions, whispers of past human tech entangled with Xylarian upgrades or downgrades, depending on how you looked at it. The first step was easy enough: disable the defensive protocols. Simple if you were a masochist with a penchant for playing Russian roulette with alien tech. Vale's fingers danced over the codes, a frantic ballet of trial and error, mostly error, with a side of desperation. Each failed attempt left her one step closer to either a breakthrough or a complete systems meltdown. Either way, it was bound to be explosive. The console flashed angrily, spitting out error messages in an alien dialect that could have been swearing for all Vale knew. "Oh, come on," she snapped, smacking the side of the console with the palm of her hand, a method that had miraculously worked on her tablet back in the day. "Just work, you glorified paperweight." Somewhere, deep in the bowels of the machine, something clicked. A series of lights flickered in tentative agreement, like a reluctant genie finally deciding to grant a wish. The defensive protocols began to unwind, a slow and creaky process, as though the AI itself was sighing at the indignity of it all. Vale chuckled darkly. "See, even machines know when to give up." But her victory dance was cut short by the sound of distant footsteps, the unmistakable clamor of Xylarians trying to regain control. "Oh, right, the locals." She glanced at her tablet, barely functional but still managing to display a rough map of the megastructure and the slowly unwinding locks. "Time to exit," pursued by angry aliens, she muttered, shouldering her pack and heading for the door. The earlier chaos had thrown the Xylarians into disarray, but she knew it wouldn't last. They'd regroup, re-strategize, and come back with a vengeance. They always did. Vale slipped into the labyrinthine corridors, moving with the practiced ease of someone who had spent her life sneaking in and out of places she had no business being. Her feet barely made a sound against the metallic floor, her breaths even and controlled despite her racing heart. The megastructure was a relic, a testament to humanity's grand ambitions and even grander failures. Yet somehow it had become a symbol of hope, or at least a very awkward peace offering. As she made her way through its innards, Vale couldn't help but marvel at the twisted beauty of it all. Here she was, a lone scavenger, poking holes in an empire built on karaoke nights and fear. A snort of laughter escaped her lips. "I really am a cosmic joke, aren't I?" The corridors twisted and turned, each one leading her deeper into the heart of the structure. Around her, the sounds of Xylarian discord echoed, a symphony of confusion and anger that played like music to her ears. The longer they spent untangling her message, the longer she had to make her escape. As she turned a corner, Vale skidded to a halt. A group of Xylarian soldiers were gathered in a room off to the side, their backs to her as they argued over a flickering tactical display. Their voices were sharp, filled with the kind of frustration that came from realizing your enemy hadn't just outsmarted you, they'd made a fool of you. Vale hesitated, the urge to intervene almost overwhelming. It would be so easy to toss another wrench into their works, to fan the flames of their confusion. But she had a bigger goal in sight, a mission that required her attention more than a temporary bout of mischief. She slipped past them like a shadow, her every movement calculated and precise. The map on her tablet guided her through the chaos, its pulsing dots marking the safest routes through the maze of corridors and dead ends. She was getting closer to the exit, the promise of freedom drawing her forward like a beacon in the dark. Behind her, the sounds of the Xylarians continued to fade, their confusion a distant memory. But Vale knew better than to assume she was in the clear. Her success was fragile, a house of cards waiting for a stiff breeze to knock it down. Finally, she reached the exit, the massive doors groaning open at her approach. The sunlight was blinding, a stark contrast to the dim corridor she'd navigated. Vale paused for a moment, her eyes adjusting to the brilliance before she stepped out into the open. The air was crisp, the landscape sprawling and wild. Xyla Roman II stretched out before her, a testament to the world's resilience despite its troubled past. She took a deep breath, the scent of freedom, tangy and bittersweet, filling her lungs. It was a heady mix, a reminder that she'd made it out alive against all odds. Her moment of triumph was short-lived. The Xylarians would be coming for her, of that she had no doubt. But for now she was free, her actions having sown the seeds of chaos within their ranks. They'd be too busy trying to regain control to chase after a lone scavenger, at least for the time being. Vale made her way toward the distant horizon, her steps confident and purposeful. She had a new goal in mind, a fresh target to aim for. The AI defensive protocols were down, but there was still work to be done. The Xylarian regime might have been weakened, but it wasn't dead. Not yet. As she walked, Vale couldn't help but smile. The universe might still be playing its cosmic joke, but she'd managed to slip in a punchline of her own. And for the moment, that was enough. Ahead, the landscape stretched out like an untamed beast, wild and unpredictable but full of potential. Vale felt a surge of adrenaline, a thrill that came from the knowledge that she'd done the impossible. She turned the Xylarians' own strengths against them, their order crumbling beneath the weight of their own arrogance. Her steps quickened, the promise of new adventures spurring her forward. The galaxy was vast and full of danger, but it was also full of opportunity, a playground of possibility for someone bold enough to seize it. Vale Saunders was many things, a scavenger, a survivor, a reluctant hero, but above all she was a fighter. She'd stood against the universe's worst and lived to tell the tale, and with the wind at her back, she was ready for whatever came next. As she disappeared into the horizon, the echoes of the Xylarians' disarray faded into the background. It was a new beginning, a chance to forge her own path in a galaxy that refused to sit still. Vale chuckled to herself, the sound low and full of promise. The universe might have dealt her a rough hand, but she'd learned to play with the cards she was given. And in a game as unpredictable as this sometimes, that was all you needed. With the future wide open and the past a distant memory, Vale embraced the unknown with open arms. The galaxy might be a mess, but it was her mess, and she was ready to take it on, one chaotic step at a time. Vale Saunders stood on the edge of the wild expanse of Xyla Roman II, her eyes scanning the horizon like a prisoner planning a breakout. She'd cracked the AI megastructure and sent its Xylarian overlords into a tailspin, but it wasn't over, not by a long shot. "Well, Vale," she muttered to herself, "you've annoyed an entire species and probably ended karaoke night forever. What's next? A career in politics?" The wind kicked up, carrying a tang of ionized atmosphere and stale rebellion. Vale took a deep breath, relishing the taste of freedom mixed with whatever second-hand pollution the Xylarian Empire had left drifting about. Behind her, the megastructure loomed like a monument to human stubbornness and alien hubris. "Nice try, universe," she said, her voice lost in the wind. "But I'm not dead yet." The galaxy, in its infinite wisdom, had decided to give Vale a breather. The Xylarians were too busy tripping over each other to notice one more human scurrying away. Besides, her little stunt had kicked off a delightful game of bureaucratic hot potato among their ranks. Nothing quite like watching a dictatorship implode from its own inefficiency. As Vale moved away from the shadow of the megastructure, she reflected on the chaos she'd unleashed. A lone scavenger had managed to outwit a regime known for its iron grip and terrible taste in music, proving that sometimes the universe did have a sense of humor. Dark and twisted, sure, but a sense of humor nonetheless. Her thoughts flickered back to the encrypted data she'd left behind, an indigestible meal for the Xylarians to choke on. The information was old, a relic from past human rebellions, but it had been enough to scramble their systems, at least temporarily. Now, the Xylarians were arguing among themselves, their usually synchronized voices hitting discordant notes. Let them have their little spat, Vale chuckled. Who knew karaoke dictators couldn't handle a little constructive criticism? With each step away from the crumbling edifice of Xylarian control, Vale felt lighter, the oppressive weight of imminent doom lifting from her shoulders. The galaxy might still be a cosmic joke, but for once, the punchline was in her favor. The landscape was an untamed beast, all right. Jagged rocks jutted from the ground like the teeth of some ancient predator. Scrubby vegetation clung to life in the crevices, surviving against all odds like she had. A fitting backdrop for a woman who had made a career out of surviving the universe's worst attempts at annihilation. As she made her way across the alien terrain, Vale allowed herself a moment of reflection. Her actions had set off a chain reaction of unintended consequences. The Xylarian regime, once unassailable, now teetered on the edge, its foundation cracked by the singular act of a stubborn human. Oh, the irony! The Xylarians, with their shiny tech and superior firepower, had been laid low by a bit of human audacity mixed with a dash of chaos. Vale couldn't help but smirk at the thought. Maybe, just maybe, the galaxy was starting to level the playing field. Here's to peace through unintended consequences, she muttered dryly, her voice swallowed by the wind. The prospect of peace was a strange one. The Xylarians might have been oppressive karaoke enthusiasts, but they'd kept the galaxy from tearing itself apart. Now, with their grip slipping, there was room for something new, something more diverse. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Would the galaxy stabilize under new leadership? Could different species work together without resorting to declarations of war over trivial misunderstandings? It was a gamble, but one worth taking. If there was one thing Vale had learned, it was that the universe had a knack for surprising you when you least expected it. Her journey took her across a landscape that was stubbornly beautiful in its own right, a patchwork of rugged terrain and open skies, untouched by the Xylarians' heavy-handed regime. As she walked, she considered the power of unintended actions. Her sabotage had been a desperate act, and yet it had planted the seeds for change. Perhaps there was hope for peace in unexpected places after all. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues that even a hardened cynic like Vale had to admit were breathtaking. She paused to take it in, allowing herself a moment of quiet contemplation. It wasn't every day you got to witness a cosmic reset button being pressed. "Look at that," she said to the empty landscape. "The universe might be a dumpster fire, but it sure knows how to put on a show." With nightfall, the temperature dropped, and Vale huddled deeper into her jacket, her breath visible in the cool air. The path ahead was uncertain, a twisting road of possibilities and pitfalls, but that was nothing new. She'd always been at home in the margins, navigating the spaces in between. As she settled down for the night, Vale couldn't help but think about the future. Maybe she'd find a new cause to champion, a fresh injustice to set right. Or perhaps she'd just keep running, one step ahead of the chaos she'd unleashed. Either way, she'd keep fighting because that was what she did best. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, a playground for those brave enough, or foolish enough, to seize the opportunity. Vale had always been both, and she wasn't about to stop now. Tomorrow, the galaxy might be a different place, but tonight, she'd rest easy knowing she'd made a difference. It wasn't much, but it was enough. With a final glance at the stars twinkling overhead, Vale closed her eyes, letting the soothing darkness and the quiet hum of the universe lull her into sleep. There would be fresh challenges to face in the morning, but for now, she was content to dream of a galaxy that just might be worth saving. The night wore on, and in the silence, Vale dreamed of a world where karaoke nights were just that, nights of song and laughter, not tools of oppression. A world where toasters didn't start wars and polite gestures didn't end in bloodshed. It was a nice dream, and for the moment it was enough. When dawn broke, the horizon glowed with the promise of a new day. Vale rose, dusted herself off, and prepared to continue her journey. The galaxy was still a mess, but it was her mess, and she was ready to take it on, one chaotic step at a time. With the sun on her face and the wind at her back, Vale set off into the unknown, her heart light with the thrill of possibility. The future was unwritten, a blank page waiting to be filled, and she intended to write her own story. As she disappeared into the wild expanse, leaving behind the crumbling remnants of the Xylarians' control, one thing was certain. Vale Saunders wasn't just a cosmic punchline. She was the punchline, and the galaxy had better get used to it. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and opportunity, but Vale wouldn't have it any other way. She was a survivor, a fighter, and above all, she was free. And as long as there was breath in her lungs and fire in her heart, she'd keep pushing forward, forging her own destiny in a universe that refused to sit still. The Xylarians might have controlled the stars, but Vale had something far more powerful, the human spirit. Unyielding, irreverent, and just a little bit crazy. The universe would never be the same, and for the first time that was a good thing. With a final glance back at the chaos she'd left behind, Vale grinned, her eyes bright with anticipation. The galaxy was out there, waiting for her, and she was ready to take it on, one snarky comment at a time. The wind carried her laughter into the void, a defiant sound that echoed across the universe. The cosmic joke was far from over, but for now, the last laugh was hers. And with that, she vanished into the horizon, leaving behind a world forever changed by a lone scavenger with a knack for survival and a penchant for trouble. The galaxy had been given a new hope, a fragile possibility of peace, and it was all thanks to the unintended actions of one irrepressible human. As Vale ventured into the unknown, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever lay ahead, she'd face it with the same grit and determination that had carried her this far. Because in a universe that loved to throw curveballs, Vale Saunders was the ultimate outfielder, ready to catch whatever came her way. And if she happened to throw a few curveballs of her own, well, that was just the universe's problem now. With a smirk on her lips and a fire in her soul, Vale marched into the future, confident that no matter what happened next, she'd be ready. After all, she was a cosmic joke, and she intended to keep the audience laughing.